New details are coming to light nearly 2 months after a badly decomposed body of a teenage girl was found in a Tesla belonging to viral artist David, whose real name is David Anthony Burke. The 20-year-old has been quiet since workers at a tow yard realized a horrific smell was coming from the trunk. And while investigators are remaining tight-lipped about 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez's death, a private investigator has uncovered many interesting pieces of information, including pill bottles found at a home where the singer had been living, that add even more layers to this mystery. I'm Angenette Levy, and this is Crime Fix. If you ever get hurt, you might need someone in your corner to fight for you, and Morgan & Morgan can do that. The firm has more than 1,000 lawyers on its team because they are big winners. They've recovered more than $25 billion for 500,000 clients. In the last few months, a client in Florida got $12 million after the insurance company offered just $350,000. In Pennsylvania, a client was awarded $26 million. That was 40 times the insurance company's $650,000 offer. Another client in PA got $29 million after being offered $500K. So even if you think your case is not worth millions and millions of dollars, why not start a claim and fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan makes it really easy. You can start a claim in just 8 clicks on your cell phone. So if you're ever hurt, start a claim at forthepeople.com/crimefix or scan that QR code that you see right there on your screen. You know, people all around the world are following the David case out of Los Angeles. Back in September, the Texas native had been living in a luxury rental home in the swanky neighborhood of Hollywood Hills, getting ready to go on an international tour. But everything came crashing down back on September 8th. That's when workers at Hollywood Tow Yard realized that a horrific, disgusting smell was coming from a Tesla that had been impounded days earlier. The Tesla had been cited for staying parked in the same spot for too long and was eventually considered abandoned and towed away. Authorities would later discover that the Tesla was registered to David Anthony Burke. That, of course, is David. And I want to be clear, Los Angeles police have not named David as a suspect, at least not publicly. In fact, no one has been identified as a possible perpetrator. But the investigation is ongoing. In the meantime, David hired Blair Burke. She's a high-profile criminal defense attorney who's worked with the clients like Harvey Weinstein, Bruno Mars, Britney Spears, and Lindsay Lohan, among others. It took the medical examiner more than a week to identify the body in the trunk as 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. The LA Times reported the remains of a head and torso were inside a bag in the trunk. A statement from the medical examiner's office said in part, the decedent was found severely decomposed inside a vehicle. She appears to have been deceased inside the vehicle for an extended period of time before being found. An official cause and manner of death have not been released. For now, it's listed as deferred. The LAPD has not ruled out the possibility that this was an accidental death. It sounds like all options are currently on the table. In another statement, the LAPD said, the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner has not yet determined the cause or manner of Ms. Rivas Hernandez's death. As such, it remains unclear whether there is any criminal culpability beyond the concealment of her body. Early reports suggested that Celeste's body was dismembered, but the medical examiner has only said her remains were in an advanced state of decomposition. You heard me read that statement earlier, and that Celeste had been dead in that vehicle for some time. But so many questions remain. Why abandon the car near the rental home? Just leaving it on the street to be impounded? Was somebody not thinking clearly? Celeste and David, they appear to have been connected. For example, a tattoo on Celeste's right index finger, which read, shh. It turns out that David has a very similar tattoo on his own hand. After news of Celeste's death spread like wildfire and how her body was found, David canceled his tour. And he went radio silent on social media, where he has millions of followers. He eventually moved out of the rental home, but not before LAPD came in and searched that property. According to LA Magazine, officers reportedly collected electronics, computers, and even searched the drains for traces of blood or tissue. The home's owner says he wasn't getting a lot of answers about whether the multi-million-dollar crime might be connected to something nefarious. So he hired private investigator Steve Fischer to dig into everything. We are going to speak with Steve Fischer in just a moment to find out the latest on what he's learned. One thing he told me, prescriptions for opiates were found at the house, but he told me he doesn't know who they were prescribed to. And he said he has no reason to believe they weren't there for anything other than a legitimate use. I want to be clear about that. But first, some backstory on how we got here and David's apparent connections to Celeste. The teen was apparently a chronic runaway, having been reported missing from Lake Elsinore, California, by her family several times. The latest report came in May of 2024 when she was just 13. Family members have since said that she had a boyfriend that they hadn't met. But guess what? His name was David. Despite the age difference, Celeste and David seemed to spend a lot of time together. She made appearances on David's social media and his Twitch streams. Others who spent time with the singer say they knew about Celeste, but didn't know she was so young. They apparently believed she was around 19 years old. 19, 13, 14, big difference. Earlier this month, a TMZ reporter asked LA County District Attorney Nathan Hochman about the case and its status. Hochman said, "It is currently under investigation. We don't discuss suspects or the points in a continuing investigation. When and if that case is presented to the DA's office and we make a decision on it, I'll make sure you are one of the first to know. A case has not been presented to our office for filing consideration." So to discuss the very latest in this case, I want to bring in Steve Fischer. He is a private investigator who works on missing persons cases, and he's involved in this case. He was actually hired to work this case by the person who owns the house where David was living. It's near the area where the Tesla was found with poor Celeste's body in that front trunk. So, Steve, I saw your tweet over the weekend. Very interesting to me. What is the very latest? Because it sounds like you have some suspicions that maybe despite Celeste being reported missing at certain times by her family, potentially maybe they knew where she was or they weren't informing the police at all times that, hey, she was at the house, they would see her at times, etc. So fill me in.
Yeah, so that's basically where my frustration comes from, is not filling the police in. You know, that you file a missing persons report, that's put into NCIC database, which is an FBI database, and law enforcement is working on that case. And when you file that, you also have a responsibility that if you have contact with the missing person, whether it be electronically or in person or anything, that you have a responsibility to notify law enforcement about that. You know, I've since learned that there's documented cases after that report was filed of her showing up at a graduation for her cousin. And I think it's safe to assume there was probably other family members at that graduation as well. She also showed up, you know, we've seen the video that's been released of the apartment complex next door to her house, where she showed up in September, was arguing with people in that house. And there was another photo of her at some sort of family event. So it is frustrating that somebody didn't call law enforcement and say, hey, she has shown up here, because what they do is then law enforcement goes and they investigate that and they see if there's a reason that CPS needs to be involved or why the child is running away and what's going on, and to keep them safe.
That's what I'm thinking. You know, I'm a parent.
Mm-hmm.
If my kid's not showing up at school, guess what? I get a phone call. My kid's not showing up at school for an extended period of time, I'm in big trouble with the law.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like a lot was going on here. A lot was falling through the cracks with Celeste. And is there any suspicion that the family potentially knew that she was hanging out with David?
Well, so I've had no communication with the family, just to be upfront.
Okay.
But you know, it was reported right at the beginning that one of the ways that an ID was done, or they thought that Celeste was the person that shrunk, was because another outlet had a conversation with the mother, and she said that she knew of a boyfriend named David. And there's also been images that have come forward on Reddit that show David in Lake Elsinore doing some sort of transaction with a kid. And then we have the teacher, somebody recording the teacher speaking about this, that Celeste was in his class and she had run away, and then she was picked up in the Hollywood Hills and brought back, then ran away again. I think that there's there's a strong possibility they knew. And it's important to realize that she's in, I think, 7th grade, maybe 8th. But I mean, this is a very young child, and you can't just let them drop out of school at 7th grade, to go live in the Hollywood Hills.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
No, she's a child.
Yeah.
She's a child.
Yes.
You were hired, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, to investigate by the owner of the home where David was living. So are there any new details that you've been able to glean from your investigation as to what may have been going on in this home?
Yeah. So, one thing I want to be clear about is, I do have a scope on my, investigation. In other words, I'm not going outside of things that originated at the house or things that happened with the cars that were normally parked at the house. So I'm not going out and trying to solve this case. I'm not working side by side with the LAPD or stepping on their investigation. It's all contained to the owner wants to know what happened or didn't happen at his house, because he had no idea that David was even living there, because he wasn't on the lease, and much less Celeste. So in that investigation, I'll tell you, there was a lot of things that were left behind, even though after the search warrant, David, I guess through his management, did send movers to come move stuff out, but they left a lot of stuff behind. And then they gave over possession of the house. So, we went through those things, and there was a lot of evidence that shows who had been there a lot. And then we also collected some surveillance from neighboring houses that showed vehicles coming and going, and vehicles that were parked there for extended periods of time. And we've been able to, in talking with neighbors, what they saw, and also that community has their own private armed security company that is 24/7. And, I've talked to them about what they've seen and noticed and any reports that they had. And there was only one written report for a noise complaint, but they're still familiar with the area and who comes and goes and what vehicles are normal to the area and what aren't.
Interesting. I know you've been talking to my buddy Jesse Weber about this a lot on Sidebar. Yeah. And you've been working this case, and I know you're not trying to step on the toes of the cops as they investigate this case, and they've been choosing their words very carefully. Is there anything that you've learned that has been shocking or surprising to you in this case?
Well, so first of all, LAPD is not sharing any information with us. I'm not getting anything more than the public's getting.
Right.
They take information from us, but they don't comment on it, and that's typical. But, I think that their believe their only press release that they came out with, I think was somewhat telling. When they said, the only criminal culpability in this case, there may be nothing beyond concealment of a body. And I think that's kind of setting people up to kind of get people to calm down a little bit and say, listen, this might be something like an overdose, or God forbid she took her own life or something. And they made a really poor decision most likely because they didn't want to expose the relationship. And they made a horrible decision in concealing her body. That's not homicide, although if it's an overdose, there are some factors that if they can prove who supplied those, then that could come in. But I don't know. That statement to me very much felt like it was, listen, lower your expectations. But hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully there's more going on.
I took it as it could be lower your expectations. It also could have been like everybody calm down and maybe calm down other people so that they cooperate as well.
That could be too. And, I would think so. One thing we definitely learned from we have a lot of imagery that was not from his Discord. There's a lot out there anyways, but we have some that wasn't out there. So we really have a good idea of who his core group of people were that were around a lot, and they were at that house a lot. And I think it would be hard for some of those people not to know something was up. There was a shift in behavior as far as like the Tesla wasn't being used anymore. I just think that they were a tight enough group that at least one or two of them probably knew. I would think those people would be cooperating with LAPD right away if they didn't have a hand in anything. Everybody knows first one there probably gets a deal. I don't know if that's the case or not, though. It's been incredibly quiet. Like his friends have not made a statement online. These are people that live online. He
Right.
hasn't made any statements online, so I don't know if he's provided them counsel as well, possibly, and everybody's just doing a very good job of being quiet or what's going on. I would think there'd be some cooperation there, but I also think that that's probably ended once Blair Burke gets involved. You got to think that, if they're questioning, they're Mirandizing them, and I got to think that they're probably not letting them speak too much or too openly if they have counsel. If somebody has, a big exposure
It does seem like, circling the wagons. That's what it feels like. They're circling the wagons. Nobody say anything. Everybody be quiet. He cancels his tour. He doesn't say a peep. Maybe that's the advice he's getting, but it does have that feel to it. And maybe Blair Burke comes in and she's like, okay, what happened? Let's figure this out. She's going to deal with the cops. But you know who moved the car, right? You're the one,
Yeah.
you figure, you have the video, you know who moved the car. So that's a big clue right there. Are you willing to share with us yet who moved the car?
Can't share who it was. And the thing about that is, though I 95% feel she was in that front trunk of the Tesla when it was moved, I can't prove that because there's no video that I have. LAPD might have a video of her being put in the vehicle. I can't even put her at the house. So I can't share. I don't want to share who that is because I do think that would really step on LAPD's toes. And that's not the intention here. It's not to put the information out first. What it was is to find out what was going on in the house and letting people know that we do know some information. So if you wanted to contact me, and people have contacted me, and I'll tell you, there's an incredible, and this is what I wonder about LAPD. They're very capable, but it's a whole different era as far as everything's happening on Discord and everything, and the capability for them to really go through and scrape everything out of there. I know that they are getting it directly from Discord in a database form, but it's all, everybody uses handles and fake names and stuff, and to figure out who's who, it takes a while to really map this whole thing together, and so maybe that's part of the delay. But there was an incredible amount of information just in the Discord server alone.
Wow. I know there's been a lot on Reddit about this, and people are interested. It's a mystery. People want to know what happened to Celeste and if David was involved. There's a lot on TikToks. David had talked about mental health issues like bipolar disorder. Do you think the internet rumor mill is helping or hurting in this case?
So at the beginning, I think Reddit was like this incredible source. There were some people that did some amazing digging and turned up some stuff that probably wouldn't have been brought forward. But as this is dragged on, and now I feel that's turned. It's we see this a lot where it's just people need something right away, so they're just coming out with wild speculations, or they're just there to basically cause drama about every single thing. Basically, everybody starts turning on it, and everybody, and especially on investigators. I get it. I don't even go there anymore. But at the beginning, it was a huge asset because people were like, "Hey, I pulled this from the Discord. I got this. I found this person was tagged in this," and it was great. But now I think it didn't hit this threshold where it was like there wasn't really any new information. So then it was like, let's just turn it ugly, and then it starts doing damage, and that's where it, for investigators, that's where it loses its the benefit, and it maintains that kind of that bad name. So, but at the beginning, I think it was helpful. Not so much anymore.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the internet stuff there can be some like amazingly good sleuths on Reddit. I mean, like some of this stuff people turn up is amazing. Yeah. However, it can also be a big dumpster fire. So you got to be careful with all that stuff.
But there are amazing. So, you look at Don't F with Cats, the documentary, and it shows that there are some people out there that have some amazing ability to, uncover these things. And in fact, Body from that documentary is one of the people that I consult with on cases. And so there are some really helpful people, but then, the ugly side comes out.
Well, Steve Fischer, it's been so great talking with you. We will keep a close eye on this and your tweets. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
So just to reiterate, there have been no suspects named publicly in this case. The toxicology results, which could take weeks or even months to come back from the lab, could tell us a lot about how Celeste died. So stay tuned. Law&Crime will stay on top of this case for you, and we will let you know if David eventually breaks his silence through his lawyer or on social media. Stay tuned. I'm Angenette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me for this episode of Crime Fix. I'll see you back here next time.